Hello and a very warm welcome to this edition of Insight. In Insight today we are going to talk about the GM crops. Remember, the Prime Minister, while addressing the inauguration session of the Indian Science Congress, the 101st Indian Science Congress, mentioned that GM crops, if at all viable, should be carried on, and in fact all the unscientific prejudices should be kept aside when we have a discourse on BT crops in the country. But does that really mean that the Prime Minister is batting GM crops? What exactly is the viability? How viable are these genetically modified crops in the country? And of course, both the scientific, the unscientific view about it, along with the other concerns like environment, its impact on agriculture, as well as health concerns. We are going to talk about all of that in this edition of Insight. And I'm joined by Dr. Sachin Chaturvedi from Research and Information System for Developing Countries, and Mr. T. Huck from who was the former head of CACP, the Committee of Agricultural Cost and Prices. Welcome to the program, all of you. Let's start the discussion with you, Dr. Chaturvedi. You, in a way, believed that the way the media had presented what Dr. Manmohan Singh has said was not exactly the complete picture, because rather he, while addressing the Science Congress, gave a very balanced view on GM crops. What is basically your view on that?
See, I think media has captured only one component of the Prime Minister's statement, which where he says that GM crops are a source for increasing productivity and ensure food security in the country eventually. But I think the first part of his sentence, where he said that the safety of the crops is equally important, and we should not undermine that. And if you see that paragraph of his statement, which media picked up only half of it, there he says that scientists would have to be socially conscientious of the fact that the kind of challenges society is facing. So from that point of view, I think there are two things coming out from Prime Minister's statement. Number one, that the scientists have social obligations like food security, like food safety and others.
Right.
And the second part of Prime Minister's statement, when he says and emphasizes on safety dimension, there are again two things. One, in terms of the safety of the product. So if GM crops are not safe, they should not be consumed, as is the public perception in Europe and in many other countries. The second dimension is its social and agricultural implications for farmers, in terms of cost of the product, in terms of the other sociological dimensions that it would have. And that's where I think we need to have a very balanced debate and approach in our policy making.
Okay.
So Prime Minister's statement that way, I think, is quite profound in terms of how we address GM, rather than merely what media has done is squeezing it in one sentence of Prime Minister betting for GM crops, which I think is very simplistic.
Okay, would you agree with him, Mr. T. Huck, on the count that what the Prime Minister has said? Or if I may just read it out, that paragraph. I recognize, and we all recognize, that the government must also focus on creating new opportunities for our bright and socially conscious scientists to ensure food security and to improve land and water productivity. We have to launch a national drive for an ever-green revolution. And he also said that while use of biotechnology has great potential to improve yields, while safety must be ensured, we should not succumb to unscientific prejudices against BT crops. Now, what here I really want to ask you, Mr. Huck, is that do we really have those unscientific prejudices about BT crops?
I think what the Prime Minister said is right. In the sense, we have both scientific evidences in favor of GM crops in several cases, and at the same time we also have unscientific prejudices. There is no doubt about it. Why I am saying this, currently if you look at the role of biotechnology all over the world, we have about 170 million hectares of area under biotechnology, like genetically manipulated crops. And this includes cotton, this includes maize, this includes soybean, this includes canola. So all over. And even just this, Europe, I should say, recently, till recently Europe was not in favor of GM crops. But we find now countries like Spain, Germany, and even Latin America, Cuba, other countries already were there. They have now jumped into the fray. So they are also now either going for field trial and also growing GM crops. So that way, and that has helped. In fact, I should say, at least in terms of improving the yields and income of the farmers.
Yeah.
So otherwise, in most of the and these are all mostly the developing countries. In fact, in the developing countries now, more than 52% of the total share of GM crops now are actually from the developing countries, not so much only the Europe and America. So that way, you find slowly there is a change. And this change is for
when
good.
We say 52% of the GM crops share, which means we are cultivating. I mean, we are part of the developing.
Part of the in India itself, 10 million hectares or so are under GM crops, particularly cotton. And cotton, if you see the cotton picture, other than Maharashtra and to some extent, otherwise, by and large, this has helped the farmers tremendously in terms of improving their yields and incomes. Earlier, average yield of cotton used to be hardly 100 to 150 kgs. Now it is about 700 kgs. In some cases, it goes up to 1,000 and 1,200 kgs. The income levels of farmers has more than 300 times increase. So, and you ask any farmers in Punjab, those or Haryana or Gujarat, those who are growing BT cotton, they are quite happy in terms of improved yield and income.
There is no. I would not, in fact, completely agree with you, because I have read stories where the farmers, most of them, in fact, cultivating BT cotton are not very happy. It's not just about money, but they are facing some other problems too.
I'll tell you that, because it is only in the case of Vidarbha and in some pockets of Andhra Pradesh. And
Vidarbha case is a particular case. I mean, let's face it. When you talk about farmers, you really can't ignore Vidarbha.
Scientifically, one has to be very sure that which crop is suitable for which areas. Vidarbha actually is not suitable for BT cotton.
Okay.
BT cotton needs some kind of assured water, and irrigated, it is mainly in irrigated areas. Vidarbha is a rain-fed area. So in the rain-fed areas, it is not suitable. Secondly, what has happened is that BT cotton basically addresses the issue of attack against bollworm. Now, attack of bollworm is taken care of by this. But then there are other sucking pests which are not taken care of by BT. And then that is frequently occurring in most of the rain-fed areas. So, by and large, the scientific community has to analyze and suggest which are the varieties which are suitable for those areas.
For those areas.
For those areas. Otherwise, the areas which are suitable, go to most parts of Gujarat, most parts of Punjab, they are all unsatisfied with this. Because this was I surveyed about 17 districts in the country only recently, only last year. And then this is my observation, that excepting in those areas where it is rain-fed, and farmers should not have gone for it, but somehow the agriculture extension workers unnecessarily suggested them to grow BT cotton there. So they are the areas where there is problem. But otherwise there is no problem. Secondly, is there was a concern like whether it is safe or not.
Right.
Safety wise, the problem is in most of the cases there is a recommendation then there should be also a refuge crop. Along with the BT cotton that you are growing, some areas should be left in or it should be covered by other crops, so that if there should be no attack by other pests and insects. That was the kind of recommendation. But in several cases, because they are only small farmers, they don't have that kind of large acreage, so they don't keep any area under that kind of refuge.
But I guess this is one of the biggest lacunae. If we can allow a Vidarbha to happen, which means we are not serious about the ramifications a particular kind of crop could have on the way farmers go about their livelihood and assuring that they get their returns from the agriculture. If we haven't been able to justify the fact that why BT cotton is being grown in certain parts of Vidarbha, which when it really can't afford to have that, when the environment doesn't allow that, when the soil doesn't allow it, why is it that we are still carrying on with that?
That is true.
Is there some sort of research lacunae here? Have we not been able to put our minds, put our heads into it? Is there some sort of problem there, Dr. Chaturvedi?
Shalini, I think let's take one step backwards and see this problem from a different perspective. And I think this debate of GM, no GM would have to be, I think, addressed in a larger context. And that larger context emanates more from our approach as a society and as a country to confine ourselves as one liner, and as I said previously in terms of Prime Minister's statement, that the media just captured one line, that PM bets for GM crops. I think as a society we would have to see what kind of dialogue we need to have between science and society, where we need science to address specific challenges, and we cannot have a uniform framework for a country which has 32 different climatic zones for production of agriculture products. So we would have to have local context to it. We would have to have local dynamics of kind of farmers. The farmers in Punjab are not the farmers in Tamil Nadu or Andhra Pradesh.
Right.
The spirit, the culture, the ethos, the production patterns, all are completely different.
Completely different.
And so is a response of the society, the ordinary citizens of specific parts of country. So there, I think as of now, science technology policy is not reflecting that dynamism to address the diversity of this country. And there, I think it's very important that we redefine our approach to science and technology. We do not take into account at all what social scientists are saying when we talk of science policy. Largely, we have left it to the scientists to decide and tell us what is good. But there is huge sociological concerns that are there.
True.
Economic concerns that are there.
True.
I mean, the farmers paying something like 1800 rupees for a 400 gram of BT cotton was a huge concern, until Andhra Agriculture Minister intervened and forced the concerned company to bring down the price to 550 rupees. Is that the way we want to govern technology intensive products? No. No company would feel incentivized. And if you see, Shalini, same thing is happening with the vaccines. You want to bring in compulsory licensing to get the vaccine or the drugs for cancer patients. That's not the way we need to manage our science technology policy. We have to create incentive structures for the private firms, but at the same time we need to protect our farmers, the consumers, and their preferences in terms of not using GM crops.
You know, there is also this understanding that there are a lot of we have left a lot of places open for the entry of maybe majority of players from outside, which means a lot of money for all those who are in the process, whether it's to do with the government or the lobbyists or those who are going to provide things, which is why there's a lot of money making going maybe at the top level. But when it comes to farmers, their families, or playing with environment, something as serious as that, or dealing with health concerns, which any one of us would be feeling, that's where we are lacking. Maybe that has not been given enough attention, and that's where you see the role of environmentalists coming to the forefront. They are the ones who have been vocal about it. Do you see that is also one of the things, one of the biggest responsibilities where we haven't seen the government quite active?
Absolutely. And that's the point I was trying to make, that you would have to see how science and society interface is emerging in this country. It's not confined to GM technology alone. There are people who are doing organic agriculture. What kind of support mechanisms we have for organic agriculture in terms of research, in terms of marketing, in terms of its production? As of now, organic products are seen largely as produced for export and not for domestic consumption, because the prices are so high. You go to any market, if you find any organic product, the prices would be exponentially high than other products. So how do you bring in compatibility? How do you bring
and why is that so? What is the reason behind that, Mr. Haq? Why are organic things so highly priced in the markets?
Mainly from a health point of view, people feel this is more safe. That is one.
But it should be available to all.
No, but
it should be done. Maybe it's not even done.
But it is not produced that way on larger scale.
That's right. That's right. That's one of the reasons why they are highly priced.
But in this context, particularly, two things have to be again analyzed properly. One is whether there is any alternative to GM crops. Why should we should only have GM? There is no other alternative, like in terms of like what GM does. GM particularly does act against some kind of pests and insects and resistant to that. like against BT
But
cotton.
you're modifying the genetic nature of a particular crop.
Crop for taking care of those problems. Like in the case of BT cotton, it was a check against the attack of bollworm, American bollworm. That was the only thing. But if there are other pests and diseases, then it cannot take care of that. That is one. Second thing is that, is it the only answer? Like if suppose you have organic kind of cotton, or you have integrated pest management kind of system, which also can take care of that, should you promote IPA, integrated pest management system, or we should promote only BT cotton? In this case, it is not that anybody is promoting BT cotton, but because of the market-led system that we have, the role of multinational companies that come into the picture, that happens, or not automatically, all over the world. It is not only in India, all over the world that is happening. And the real risk in this case is the monopolization of the seed. BT seed monopolized by a few monopolistic.
Very, very interesting.
That is the most important thing that needs to be addressed. And the question he raised, like the price.
Yeah.
Like 1600 rupees or 1800 rupees, how many farmers can afford that?
True.
Then in that case, there should be some kind of price regulation. And then when there is only one or two kind of monopolistic groups which produces or markets the whole thing, then how do you take care of this? So these are the issues which actually should be taken care of.
Okay, we'll take a very quick break now, but after the break we'll certainly talk about these aspects as to what kind of impact this would have on the seed industry and why at all the organic farming can't be really promoted. And in fact, in a few minutes from now, we'll also be joined by environmentalist Dr. Vandana Shiva on the panel. Please take a break here. Right, so we are asking our panelists today whether modified, are we just talking about modifying the food, or are we also trying to modify the thought that we have had for ages that we've had. But let's here talk about the important thing that Mr. Haq said, which is the impact that this would have on the seed industry. Because we remember the kind of protest Mahiko Monsanto had to really face in this country. How do you look at the fears that exist regarding the domestic seed industry, the kind of seeds that are provided, high-priced seeds that are provided to the farmers? You only mentioned about how BT cotton had some sort of an impact, revolt, and why some corrective measures can't be taken in time. How do you look at this aspect?
See, I think, Shalini, there are 4 important points that we should bear in mind.
Okay.
Number 1, growing monopolization in the Indian seed industry. What's happening is there are specific traits on which companies are working, and they have got sweeping patents on those seeds. I have myself interviewed several Indian seed companies which are facing this narrow scope that they have in terms of advancing their own work. So, number one trend is growing monopolization in the Indian seed industry. Second, less scope for domestic companies to come out with their own products. In fact, there are companies I met in Bangalore which were thriving companies, but are completely out of the market. Third important implication it has is pressurizing farmers to go back to the market every time to pay to the high prices that these products are for. And unfortunately, the Competition Commission or the competition policy is not going to cover agriculture, and we would have to see how best Competition Commission can look into seed industry to control and guide the monopoly pricing that's happening in the seed sector. Fourth and the last one is to strengthen the efforts of the civil society organizations which are working for saving of seeds with the farmers. This movement was very strong at one point, but now is not getting into the right direction where it should have moved. So I think there are efforts needed to strengthen this.
Mr. Haq, how do you respond to the fact that, you know, food security is one of the aspects that can be addressed, one of the issues that can be addressed if we introduce the genetically modified crops? And do you in a way also agree that we, as you said, that why we resort to a genetically modified crop when we can have some better versions, when we can have something which is which secures our health, which avoids those risks, then what something which is modifying the genetic nature of a thing can do?
That is true. One thing is that, as you said, regarding GM food, I personally feel that I think we need to take a lot of care before we say that it should be done, because after all it is food and it will affect your health. Currently you are only thinking in terms of environment and all that, but immediately on as soon as you introduce GM food, so far we have not done
those concerns were expressed when we had the BT brinjal thing going the rounds, because as of now, I mean, we've had only that thing in cotton.
That is true.
You're not eating cotton,
right? Exactly.
But your livestock is,
right.
And there were some sort of impacts that the sheep's, I mean, of course the livestock feeding on it had they had shown those symptoms too.
But even now they are feeding livestock with cotton kind of straws and all that. So that is there even now. So that is not so much an issue. But then certainly for GM brinjal or GM food, I think.
So that's the irony. I mean, in this country, we just keep the livestock out
of
our.
We're not keeping them out.
But that's how it is. I mean, if animals die, it's okay. But if humans die, we really have to think.
But so far, even that is not. There is no clear evidence. I tell you very frankly, as an independent observer, I am not either this way or that way.
That's right. That's right.
That's why I can say very confidently that there are one or two cases where we visited in Andhra Pradesh. They said some goat, ate something and then died that way. But otherwise, in Maharashtra, I did not get any evidence of this kind. Punjab, I did not get any evidence of this kind. So by and large, we did not get some such picture even from the farmers. So that is one thing. Second thing is, for GM food, the problem is that the unknown health risk. Professor B.M. Bhargav, for instance, all the time he has been talking about it, that since we have not been able to identify what could be the unknown health risk due to GM food, I think we should not go for it unless we do another 10 years of research and say that we come out clearly that there is no such risk. That is one. But secondly, people also say that all over the world, like we have soybean oil, you have GM maize, even in India, many of the corn chips are being sold, and that is all GM. So we are all eating. I don't know how it is affecting or not. There is no any.
I hope there is no link between the rising cases of cancer in this country and GM crops
so
and the eating of.
Could be, I don't know, but at least I have no evidence so far. At least I have not collected any some such thing, or I have no information. But certainly I can say that the whole.
Are we doing enough research on that?
We are trying to at least get information and see what it. At least I am on the job. Yeah. At least in Europe, of course, there is not much of these things, but in the whole of Latin America and America, a lot of people are consuming soybean oil, a lot of people are consuming those corns. That is their main source of both oil and food. So they are surviving anyway. And even without that, the kind of things that we have in India in the food sector, so much of food safety concerns we express, but then in the ground you find so much of problem, like so much of pesticides you use. So much of
isn't it again? I mean, there are two opinions here. Our production is quite good,
Yes,
I mean, when it comes to the agricultural production,
yes,
rather in the last few years, we've
that
seen
is
that the
true.
production has been increasing.
Yes, that is true.
Which means that if the production can increase due
Yes.
to certain factors,
Yes,
you can
yes.
say that
Yes, yes.
the monsoon has been good,
No, that is
the other
true, that
factors
is
have
true,
been
that is
there.
true.
Which means we are able to meet somehow the demands of the people.
Yes, yes, that is true. We don't, for food production, we don't need GM currently as on
Great,
today.
great.
That much I can say very clearly.
So that's something which is on. Then why do we need GM?
I think first point, Shalini, is that we first should, in a way, revisit our legislative framework. There are two important bills which are pending before Parliament for very long. One is the bill which affects the seed industry. So that bill is pending since, I think, 2003. It was resubmitted in 2009 and then in 2011. But after the amendments, after the inputs from the standing committee, the bill is ready now. I think it should be addressed in terms of how we want to govern the seed sector. Second is the BRI bill. And BRI bill, the Biotechnology Regulatory Authority of India bill, which was referred to the select committee, now it's back and should be tabled before this Lok Sabha goes. It's very important that we bring in mechanisms to regulate and guide the markets and the different actors who are involved. So why we need GM is one question, but where and how we are going to regulate it is much deeper and much more important and much more substantive question, which we haven't addressed so far. What has happened is since 1989 we have been trying to address it under Environment Protection Act of India, under EPA, which is not the only implication of biotech. There are implications, as you rightly mentioned, about the cancer, but people might come out with livestock implications. Dr. Hawk mentioned about that. So there are widespread implications possible out of GM. So we need to see, and even on the kind of human genetic based drugs which are coming in.
Yeah.
So there are widespread implications, and we have to have these key legislations in place. And that's where systemic response, course correction is required. That's one. But why do we need GM? That another question could be, why not? But the question is, are we treating ourselves as safe when we are using it?
Okay,
That's important.
We'll certainly ask that question to Dr. Vandana Shiva, who has reached here and who will be joining us after this very short break. Please stay tuned.